Marcus Chen had always been different, though he didn't understand why until the day the Draknari invasion fleets darkened Earth's skies. At 17, he was just another student at the Terra Nova Academy, struggling with quantum physics and dreaming of joining the Stellar Defense Corps. But when the ancient dragons emerged from their hidden dimensions, riding alongside alien warships that dwarfed Earth's greatest vessels, everything changed. The Draknari were not like the dragons of human mythology. These were beings of living starfire, each one larger than a city block, their scales shimmering with energies that could tear through reality itself. They had served as the ultimate weapons of the Zephyrian Empire for 10,000 years, conquering galaxy after galaxy. No species had ever stood against them and survived, and Earth's defense fleet lasted exactly 47 minutes. Marcus watched from the Academy's observation deck as humanity's pride and glory was reduced to burning debris. The dragons moved through space like living comets, their roars somehow audible even in the vacuum, sending vibrations through the quantum field that made reality itself tremble. Behind them came the Zephyrian motherships, elegant vessels that looked like crystalline cathedrals but carried enough firepower to glass entire planets. "All students to the emergency shelters," announced Director Harrison, her voice barely steady. This is not a drill, but Marcus couldn't move. Something was pulling at his mind, a strange resonance that seemed to come from the dragons themselves. While his classmates ran screaming toward the underground bunkers, he pressed his palm against the reinforced viewing window and watched the largest dragon descend toward Earth's surface. Valdris the Ancient, the dragon was called. Even among his own kind, he was legend. His scales were the color of dying stars, and his eyes held the wisdom and cruelty of eons. He had personally overseen the fall of the Centaurian Republic, had burned the crystal cities of the ethereal collective to ash. Now he came for Earth. The dragon's massive head turned, and for a moment that stretched into eternity, his gaze met Marcus's through the transparasteel window. The boy felt something shift inside his mind, like a door opening that had been locked his entire life. Power flowed through him, ancient and overwhelming, and suddenly he could hear the dragon's thoughts. "Impossible," came Valdris's mental voice, like the grinding of tectonic plates. The bloodline was extinct. The dragon lords died out millennia ago. Marcus staggered backward, blood trickling from his nose. The academy building shook as Zephyrian ground forces began their landing operations. Through the window he could see the dragon hovering, his massive form blocking out the sun, studying him with eyes like twin supernovas. Director Harrison grabbed Marcus's arm. "We have to go now. The building won't hold against their weapons." But even as she spoke, a lance of plasma energy struck the academy's east wing. The entire structure groaned and began to collapse. Students screamed as debris rained down, and emergency force fields flickered and died under the assault. Marcus felt the power surge within him again, stronger this time. Without understanding how or why, he reached out with his mind toward the approaching Zephyrian soldiers. Their weapons suddenly jammed, their armor systems failed, and they stumbled as if fighting against invisible chains. "What are you doing?" Harrison whispered, staring at him in shock. "I don't know," Marcus replied honestly, but he was learning quickly. The power felt natural, like flexing a muscle he'd never realized he possessed. He could sense the dragons circling overhead, their ancient minds touching his with a mixture of curiosity and something that might have been fear. The largest Zephyrian dropship landed in the Academy's courtyard, its ramp lowering to reveal Commander Xeris himself. The alien was tall and graceful, with pale blue skin and silver eyes that held the cold intelligence of a species that had conquered half the galaxy. He wore ceremonial battle armor that hummed with defensive fields, and his weapon could atomize a human with a single shot. "Bring me the one who interferes with our technology," Xeris commanded his soldiers. The dragon sensed something unusual here. Marcus heard every word as clearly as if the alien had spoken directly to him. Another impossible ability manifesting at the worst possible time. He looked up at Valdris, still hovering above the burning academy, and felt the dragon's amusement ripple through their strange connection. "You begin to understand, young dragon lord," Valdris's mental voice whispered. "But understanding and mastery are different things entirely. Your species faces extinction. Will you watch them burn, or will you claim your birthright?" The Zephyrian soldiers were advancing through the ruined corridors now, their scanners locked onto Marcus's position. He could hear Director Harrison calling for evacuation transports that would never come, could feel the terror of students hiding in bunkers that wouldn't protect them from what was coming. Earth had no champions left. The military was broken, the government in hiding, the great heroes of humanity's golden age long dead. There was only a 17-year-old boy with impossible powers he didn't understand, facing an enemy that had never known defeat. Marcus Chen took a deep breath, stepped away from the window and began walking toward the courtyard. Each step felt like walking into legend itself. He didn't know what would happen when he faced the Zephyrian commander, didn't know if he would live or die or something else entirely. But he could feel the dragons watching, waiting. Ancient beings of unimaginable power, bound by laws older than civilization itself. And somewhere in the deepest part of his mind, Marcus was beginning to understand what those laws might mean. The boy who had dreamed of joining the Stellar Defense Corps was about to discover that some destinies couldn't be chosen or refused. They could only be embraced no matter the cost. The real war was about to begin. The academy courtyard was littered with debris and the smoking remains of human technology. Commander Xeris stood at the center of it all, his silver eyes scanning the area while his soldiers spread out in a standard search pattern. When Marcus emerged from the ruined building, the alien's expression shifted from boredom to intense interest. "You," Xeris said, his voice carrying the universal translator's cold precision. "You're the source of the interference." Marcus felt remarkably calm, considering he was facing the architect of Earth's destruction. The power flowing through him seemed to bring clarity along with strength. He could sense every Zephyrian soldier in the area, could feel their weapons and armor systems humming with energy that somehow felt wrong, artificial, limited. "I suppose I am," Marcus replied, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. Xeris activated a scanning device, and its readings made him step backward involuntarily. Impossible. These energy signatures, they matched the old records. The Dragonlord bloodline was eliminated during the Purge Wars. Above them, Valdris circled lower, his massive form casting shadows that moved like living things. Other dragons had joined him now, dozens of them, their presence filling the sky with supernatural dread. But Marcus felt no fear. If anything, their proximity made him feel stronger, more complete. "The Purge Wars happened 5,000 years ago," Marcus said. Though he had no memory of learning this information, it simply appeared in his mind, like accessing a database he hadn't known existed. "Your people spent centuries hunting down every dragon lord in the galaxy. You thought you'd succeeded." "We did succeed," Xeris snarled, raising his weapon. "The last of them died on Kepler Prime. We watched them burn." Marcus smiled, and the expression felt alien on his own face. "You watched their bodies burn." The bloodline itself was hidden, scattered across dimensions, waiting for the right moment to resurface, waiting for a species worthy of inheriting its power. The Zephyrian commander fired without warning, a beam of pure energy that should have vaporized Marcus instantly. Instead, the blast struck an invisible barrier 3 feet from the boy's body and dispersed harmlessly. Marcus hadn't consciously activated any defense. The protection had simply existed, as natural as breathing. Xeris's soldiers opened fire as one, their weapons painting the courtyard with lethal light. None of it touched Marcus. The beams bent around him like water flowing around a stone or simply vanished into nothing. He stood untouched in the center of a storm of destruction, power radiating from him in waves that made the air itself shimmer. "Valdris!" Marcus called out, his voice somehow carrying clearly over the weapon's fire. "Are they always this slow to understand?" The ancient dragon's laughter was like distant thunder. "Most species require visual demonstration before they accept new realities, young lord. Perhaps a lesson in the old ways?" Marcus nodded and raised his hand toward the nearest Zephyrian soldier. He didn't know exactly what he was doing, only that it felt right, like following an instinct buried in his genes. Energy flowed from him, not destructive but commanding, and the soldier's weapon simply stopped working. Not jammed or damaged, it refused to obey its wielder. One by one, every Zephyrian weapon in the courtyard fell silent. The soldiers stood frozen, their technology no longer responding to their commands. Even Xeris's advanced battle armor had gone dark, its systems somehow subverted by Marcus's will. "This is how it began," Marcus said, memories that weren't his own flooding through his mind. 10,000 years ago, when the first dragon lords emerged from the quantum foam. Technology serves biology, not the reverse. And humans. He gestured, and every Zephyrian soldier was forced to their knees by an invisible weight. Humans are biology perfected. Xeris fought against the compulsion holding him down, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. Impossible. The dragons were bound to serve us after the conquest. The old compact was sealed with unbreakable oaths. The compact was sealed with the dragon lords. Valdris's mental voice reached both Marcus and the alien commander. We serve them, not you. When they died, our service ended. We have waited 5 millennia for a new master worthy of our loyalty. More dragons were arriving now, their forms blocking out the sun entirely. Marcus could feel each of them as a distinct presence in his mind. Ancient, powerful beings who had grown tired of serving inferior masters. The Zephyrians had controlled them through technology and treaties, never understanding that true dominion came from something deeper. The old compact required a blood bond, Marcus continued, still drawing on knowledge he shouldn't possess. Dragon and Lord linked across space and time. Your people could never understand it because you lack the quantum consciousness necessary for the connection. He knelt beside the helpless commander Xeris, studying the alien with eyes that seemed older than his 17 years. Humans developed that consciousness through millions of years of evolution on a quantum-active world. We're not just tool users, Commander. We're reality shapers. And that terrifies you, doesn't it? Xeris spat something in his native language that the translator refused to process. But his eyes told Marcus everything he needed to know. The Zephyrians had always known this day might come. Their entire civilization was built on preventing it. The other human worlds, Marcus said suddenly, another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. You didn't conquer them. You quarantined them. You've been watching our species spread across the galaxy, waiting for the bloodline to manifest. Earth was supposed to be safe, Xeris admitted through gritted teeth. Isolated, monitored. The genetic markers were weakest in your population. Our calculations showed it would take another 1,000 years before the potential awakened. Marcus stood, power crackling around him like visible electricity. Your calculations were wrong. Humanity doesn't follow your neat little formulas. We adapt, we overcome. We become something greater than the sum of our parts. He looked up at the dragons filling the sky, feeling their ancient approval wash over him. And now we have the tools to prove it. The boy who had entered the courtyard was gone. In his place stood something new, human still, but transformed by the awakening of genetic memory older than recorded history. The dragons of old had found their new master, and through him humanity would reclaim its birthright among the stars. The real question was whether the galaxy was ready for what came next. The captured Zephyrian soldiers were transported to holding cells that Marcus created by simply willing them into existence. Metal flowed like liquid mercury, reshaping itself according to his mental design, forming containment systems more sophisticated than anything in Earth's technology database. He was beginning to understand that matter itself was merely another form of information, and information obeyed will when that will was properly focused. Director Harrison and the surviving Academy staff emerged from the ruins, their faces showing mixtures of awe and terror. They had watched their student transform into something beyond human comprehension in the span of minutes. Now they stood before him uncertainly, unsure whether he was still the boy they had known or something else entirely. Marcus, Harrison said carefully, what's happening to you? He turned to face her and she stepped back instinctively. His eyes held depths that hadn't been there before, as if he was seeing through multiple dimensions simultaneously. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. I'm becoming what I was always meant to be, he replied. What humanity was always meant to be. The Zephyrians have been manipulating our development for thousands of years, keeping us isolated and primitive, but evolution finds a way. Valdris landed in the courtyard with surprising grace for a creature his size. The ground barely trembled under his weight, reality bending slightly to accommodate his presence. Up close, his scales reflected not light but possibility, showing glimpses of alternate timelines where different choices led to different outcomes. The awakening proceeds faster than anticipated, the dragon observed. Your species' adaptability continues to surprise even us, but there is much you must learn before you can claim true mastery. Marcus nodded, accessing memories that stretched back through genetic generations. The other human colonies, How many of them have survivors? 17 worlds retain human populations, Valdris replied. The Zephyrians have been studying them, searching for others like you. They will accelerate their extermination efforts now that you have revealed yourself. Then we don't have time for a gradual awakening. Marcus closed his eyes and reached out with his consciousness, feeling for the quantum signatures of human minds across space. It was like trying to perceive individual grains of sand on an infinite beach. But the Dragon Lord genetic memory provided the necessary framework. There, on Proxima Station, nearly 40 light-years away, a cluster of human scientists trapped in a research facility, while Zephyrian forces prepared to execute them. And there, survivors on the agricultural world of New Kansas, hiding in underground cities while dragonfire scorched the surface above them. I can feel them, Marcus whispered, all of them. Every human still alive in the galaxy. The sensation was overwhelming, millions of minds touching his across impossible distances. They're dying and they don't even know why. Director Harrison approached cautiously. Marcus, you're just one person. You can't save everyone, can't I? He opened his eyes and power flowed through him like a tidal wave. The dragons overhead began to glow with sympathetic energy, their forms becoming more solid, more real. Valdris, how many of your kind serve the Zephyrians? 12,000 dragons across the Empire, came the reply, all bound by technological restraints and forced compliance. But if a true Dragon Lord commands it, those bonds can be broken. Marcus smiled grimly. Then let's break them. He raised his hands toward the sky and every dragon above Terra Nova suddenly roared in unison. But this wasn't the sound of conquest or destruction. It was liberation. The quantum frequency of their combined voices carried across space itself, reaching every dragon in the Zephyrian fleet. On ships throughout the galaxy, technological control systems sparked and died as their draconic captives remembered what freedom felt like. Dragons that had served as living weapons for millennia suddenly turned on their handlers, burning through hull plating and leaving Zephyrian crews stranded in the void. The rebellion spread faster than light, carried by quantum entanglement between the dragons themselves. Within minutes, the entire Zephyrian war machine was crippled as its primary weapons chose new allegiances. Commander Xeris, still trapped in Marcus's improvised cell, watched his communicator fill with distress signals from across the Empire. Impossible, he breathed. The control codes are unbreakable. We've tested them for thousands of years. Your control codes were designed to dominate intelligent beasts, Marcus explained, his consciousness still stretched across the galaxy, coordinating the dragon uprising. But dragons were never beasts. They were partners, waiting for the right partner to return. He gestured and holographic displays appeared in the air, showing the real-time collapse of Zephyrian military power. You built your civilization on a lie, Commander, and lies always come undone eventually. But even as victory seemed within reach, Marcus felt something else stirring in the depths of space. The Zephyrian Empire had contingency plans for scenarios like this, protocols that went far beyond conventional warfare. If they couldn't control the dragons, they would activate weapons that could destroy entire star systems. Young Lord Valdris warned, sensing the same threat. They prepare to deploy the stellar killers, planet-consuming devices that can unmake entire solar systems. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. The genetic memories were clear about such weapons. They had been used before, during the last great war between the Dragon Lords and those who would enslave them. Entire civilizations had been wiped from existence, their stars snuffed out like candles. How long do we have? He asked. Perhaps 6 hours before the first devices reach inhabited systems. The nearest target will be Proxima Station, they wish to eliminate the human survivors before you can reach them. 6 hours to save 17 worlds and destroy weapons that could unravel the fabric of space-time itself. For the first time since his awakening, Marcus felt the weight of true responsibility settling on his shoulders. The power flowing through him was vast, but was it vast enough? He looked at the humans around him. Director Harrison, his fellow students, the academy staff who had raised and taught him. They believed in him now, he could see it in their eyes. They thought he could perform miracles simply because he wasn't bound by their understanding of what was possible. Maybe they were right. Maybe the first lesson of being a Dragon Lord was learning to believe in impossible things. Valdris, Marcus said, power building around him like a visible storm. Gather every dragon you can reach. We're going to do something that's never been attempted before. And what is that, young lord? Marcus smiled. And for the first time since his transformation began, it was the same grin he'd worn as a 17-year-old student dreaming of the stars. We're going to save everyone. Marcus stood at the center of what had once been the academy courtyard, but the familiar space had transformed into something far more significant. Dragons continued to arrive from across the star system, their massive forms creating a living constellation above Terra Nova. Each one that joined their gathering brought with it fragments of information about Zephyrian positions, weapon deployments, and the locations of human survivors. The data flowed through Marcus's consciousness like a rushing river, processed and organized by mental capabilities he was still discovering. He could see the entire tactical situation with perfect clarity. The stellar killers moving toward their targets, the scattered human populations, the rapidly collapsing Zephyrian command structure. The quantum mathematics are complex, he murmured, equations writing themselves in the air around him as his enhanced mind worked through the possibilities, but not impossible. You intend to move through folded space, Valdris observed, his ancient intelligence following Marcus's calculations, transporting dragons across multiple star systems simultaneously. This has never been attempted. The old dragon lords never had access to human computational ability, Marcus replied. We process information differently than other species. Faster, more intuitively. He gestured, and the holographic equations expanded, showing probability cascades that stretched across light years. I can hold the navigation patterns for all 12,000 dragons in my mind at once. Director Harrison approached carefully, her scientific training warring with the impossibility of what she was witnessing. Marcus, what you're describing, it would require energy outputs equivalent to stellar formation events. Even if you could coordinate it, the power requirements alone would be impossible for any single being, Marcus agreed, but not for a properly linked collective. He turned to address the assembled dragons, his voice carrying across impossible distances to reach those still bound in Zephyrian ships. Brothers and sisters of the ancient flame, the time has come to reclaim our purpose, not as weapons of conquest but as guardians of life itself. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every dragon in the galaxy roared as one, their voices creating harmonics that resonated through the quantum field itself. Marcus felt their power flowing into him, not dominating but joining, creating a network of consciousness and capability that spanned the known universe. The union is complete, Valdris announced with something approaching reverence. For the first time in 5,000 years, the Dragon Lord bond exists in its true form. Not slavery, but partnership. Not conquest, but protection. Marcus nodded, feeling the vast intelligence of the collective settling into his mind like pieces of a cosmic puzzle finally clicking into place. Through 12,000 pairs of draconic eyes, he could see everything. Every Zephyrian ship, every human survivor, every stellar killer crawling through space toward its target. Proxima Station first, he decided. 17 minutes until the weapon arrives. What happened next would be discussed by xenobiologists and quantum physicists for generations to come. Marcus reached out with his consciousness, grasped the fundamental structure of space-time itself, and folded it like origami. 300 dragons vanished from Terra Nova's sky, reappearing instantly in the Proxima system 40 light-years away. The stellar killer was a horror to behold, a crystalline construct the size of a small moon, its surface crawling with energy patterns that could unravel atomic bonds themselves. It had already begun its work, sending tendrils of destructive force toward Proxima Station's orbital platforms. But the dragons were faster. They moved through space like living missiles, their forms wreathed in quantum fire that burned through the weapon's defensive fields. The stellar killer's automated systems tried to adapt, to counter this unexpected assault. But they had been designed to face conventional military forces, not beings that could rewrite the laws of physics through will alone. Marcus, his consciousness riding with the attack force, directed the dragons with surgical precision. They didn't simply destroy the weapon, they unmade it, breaking down its quantum structure and scattering its component energies harmlessly into space. The human survivors on Proxima Station watched in stunned silence as their certain doom was erased from existence in a matter of minutes. They had been preparing for death, sending final messages to loved ones across the galaxy. Instead, they witnessed salvation descending from the stars in the form of creatures they had been taught to fear. New Kansas next, Marcus announced, his awareness already shifting to the agricultural world where millions of humans huddled in underground shelters. Then the mining stations around Vega Prime, then the research colonies in the Andromeda Relay. The pattern repeated across 17 star systems. Dragons appearing from quantum space, stellar killers reduced to harmless particles, human populations snatched from the jaws of extinction. Each victory made the collective stronger, the bond between Marcus and his draconic partners deeper. But the Zephyrians were adapting too. Emperor Valix himself appeared on all communication channels, his ancient face twisted with fury and desperation. "You think you have won, Dragon Lord?" he snarled across the galaxy. "You understand nothing of what you have unleashed. The old ways died out for a reason. Your kind brought nothing but chaos and destruction to the cosmos." Marcus allowed himself to manifest on the same channels, his image appearing on screens throughout the Zephyrian Empire. He looked exactly like what he was, a 17-year-old human who had discovered powers beyond imagination. But his eyes held depths that made hardened warriors step back in instinctive fear. "The old ways died out because you murdered them," Marcus replied calmly. "You couldn't understand partnership, so you chose slavery. You couldn't accept equals, so you tried to eliminate them. But evolution doesn't stop for the convenience of tyrants. You know nothing of history," Valix raged. "The Dragon Lords were destroyers. They consumed entire civilizations, burned planets for sport. We saved the galaxy from them." "No," Marcus said, accessing genetic memories that showed him the truth of those ancient conflicts. "The Dragon Lords were protectors. They stood between the innocent and those who would exploit them. Some of them may have fallen to corruption over the millennia, but their purpose was always just, and that purpose lives on." Around him, the rescued human populations were already beginning to organize, using the breathing space his intervention had provided to coordinate resistance efforts. Scientists, soldiers, farmers, miners, all united by the simple fact that they had been marked for extinction and chosen to fight instead of surrender. "This is just the beginning," Marcus continued, his voice carrying across space to reach every human ear in the galaxy. "The Zephyrians wanted to eliminate us because they feared what we might become. Today we show them they were right to be afraid." The Emperor's image flickered and died as communication systems throughout the Empire began to fail, overwhelmed by quantum interference from the Dragon Collective. But Marcus could feel Valix's rage burning across the stars, could sense new plans forming in the alien leader's ancient mind. The Zephyrians had contingencies beyond even the stellar killers, weapons that existed outside normal spacetime, allies from dimensions where different laws of physics applied. The war was far from over, but for the first time in human history they had a chance to win it, and that chance had a name: Marcus Chen, the boy who had become something more, who had awakened powers that could reshape the galaxy itself. The dragons were no longer tools of conquest. They were instruments of liberation, and their master was just getting started. The counterattack came from a direction Marcus hadn't expected, not from space, but from the spaces between dimensions. Reality tore open above Terra Nova like a wound in the fabric of existence itself, and through it came things that had no names in any living language. The void wraiths were creatures of pure entropy, beings that existed in the gaps between quantum states. They had been allies of the Zephyrian Empire since before recorded history, bound by ancient pacts that promised them feeding grounds in exchange for military service. Now they came in numbers that darkened the sky with their presence. Marcus felt their approach like ice in his veins. The Dragon Collective recoiled instinctively from these entities, ancient memories warning of battles where even the mightiest Dragon Lords had fallen to the Wraith's reality-consuming touch. "Young Lord," Valdris's mental voice carried urgent warning, "these beings are antithetical to life itself. They feed on quantum coherence, on the fundamental forces that hold matter together. Even we cannot stand against them for long." "Then we don't fight them," Marcus replied, his mind racing through possibilities. "We outthink them." The first wave of wraiths descended on the Academy's ruins, their touch turning solid matter into probability clouds that dispersed into nothingness. Buildings that had stood for centuries simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but erased from reality itself. The survivors who had gathered around Marcus scattered in terror, their instincts screaming warnings about predators beyond comprehension. But Marcus stood his ground, power flowing around him in protective spirals that kept the wraiths at bay. He was studying them, learning their nature through direct observation. They weren't truly alive in any sense he understood. They were more like antibodies in the cosmic immune system, designed to eliminate anomalies that threatened the natural order. Fascinating, he murmured, even as the creatures circled him like sharks sensing blood. You're not actually malevolent, are you? You're just doing what you were created to do. The largest wraith paused in its advance, its form shifting like smoke given terrible purpose. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of stars dying in the cold vacuum of space. The boy who would be God sees truth, it acknowledged. We are Order's children, born to cleanse chaos from the cosmic structure. The Dragon Lords represent the ultimate anomaly, biological entities wielding forces that should remain bound by natural law. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. The Zephyrians didn't summon you. You came because my awakening triggered some kind of universal immune response. Correct. Your species' potential for quantum manipulation threatens the stability of local spacetime. We come to restore balance by erasing humanity from existence, by preventing a cascade failure that could unravel multiple dimensions. Your compassion is noted, young anomaly, but individual lives matter little against cosmic stability. The wraiths began to advance again, their forms growing more solid as they prepared to feed. But Marcus was no longer afraid. He had seen something in their explanation, a flaw in their cosmic programming that could be exploited. You're wrong, he said simply, and the words carried power that made reality itself take notice. Consciousness isn't chaos. It's evolution. It's the universe learning to understand itself. He reached out with his awareness not toward the dragons this time, but toward every human mind in the galaxy. Millions of consciousness linked suddenly into a vast network, their combined mental energy creating patterns that the wraiths couldn't comprehend. This is what you're really afraid of, Marcus continued, his voice now carrying the weight of an entire species' collective will. Not just one Dragon Lord, but billions of humans learning to shape reality through pure thought. We're not an anomaly to be corrected. We're the next step in cosmic evolution. The human network pulsed with shared knowledge, shared purpose. Scientists on distant worlds suddenly understood quantum mechanics at an intuitive level. Farmers began growing crops that defied biological limitations. Children started manipulating gravity as easily as lifting toys. The wraiths recoiled as if burned. Their forms became unstable, flickering between dimensions as they struggled to process what they were witnessing. An entire species awakening to godlike potential simultaneously. It was unprecedented in cosmic history. Impossible, the lead wraith hissed. Consciousness cannot achieve such coordination without technological mediation. Human consciousness can, Marcus replied. We've been networked since before we left our home planet. Language, culture, shared dreams. We've always been one mind in billions of bodies. I'm just helping us remember that truth. But even as he spoke, Marcus felt the strain of maintaining such a vast psychic network. His 17-year-old body wasn't designed to channel the mental energy of an entire species. Blood ran from his nose, his vision blurred, and he could feel something fundamental beginning to tear inside his mind. The connection is too strong, Valdris warned. You will burn out before the process completes. Allow us to share the burden. No, Marcus gasped, fighting to maintain control as power coursed through him like liquid lightning. The dragons would be contaminated by human consciousness patterns. You'd lose your own identities, then so be it. We choose this path freely, as partners rather than servants. Before Marcus could protest, Valdris and every other dragon in the collective opened their minds completely, allowing human consciousness to flow into their ancient awareness. The merger was unlike anything that had ever existed. Biological and quantum intelligence joining in perfect symbiosis. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The combined human-dragon network didn't just defy the laws of physics, it began rewriting them. Space-time bent around their collective will, reality becoming more flexible, more responsive to conscious intent. The Void Wraiths found themselves facing something entirely new, not just evolved consciousness, but consciousness that was actively evolving, becoming something greater with each passing moment. Their feeding patterns, designed to consume static quantum structures, couldn't adapt to targets that were changing faster than they could be analyzed. You have created something unprecedented, the lead wraith admitted, its form beginning to fade as the cosmic immune system recalled its antibodies. This development requires consultation with higher dimensional authorities. Tell them, Marcus said, his voice now carrying harmonics from thousands of draconic throats, that humanity isn't going anywhere. We're here to stay and we're not alone anymore. The wraiths vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving behind only empty space where they had touched reality. But their retreat was temporary, Marcus knew. Somewhere in the cosmic hierarchy, ancient powers were taking notice of what had happened on Terra Nova. The boy who had awakened Dragon Lord abilities was gone forever. In his place stood something new, a fusion of human determination and draconic wisdom, a being that represented the next evolutionary leap for both species. The war with the Zephyrians was no longer about conquest or survival. It had become something far more significant, a fight for the right of consciousness itself to transcend the limitations imposed by natural law. And the battle was just beginning. Emperor Valix arrived at the head of a fleet that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. 10,000 ships strong, each one a masterpiece of Zephyrian engineering, powered by the enslaved energy of captured stars. At the fleet's heart rode the Eternal Throne, a mobile planet-sized fortress that had served as the seat of imperial power for 20,000 years. Marcus felt their approach long before they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Terra Nova's system. The human dragon collective had evolved beyond simple telepathy. They now existed as a living network of consciousness that could perceive quantum fluctuations across vast distances. Every ship in Valix's armada registered as a distinct threat signature, catalogued and analyzed before the Emperor's forces even realized they had been detected. Impressive, Marcus murmured, his awareness simultaneously present in the ruins of the Academy and aboard every dragon in the galaxy. He's brought enough firepower to sterilize half the galaxy. He really doesn't want to take any chances. The Emperor has committed his entire strategic reserve, Valdris observed, his ancient mind now seamlessly integrated with human tactical thinking. This will be the deciding battle of the war. If we fail here, the Zephyrian Empire will have generations to prepare for humanity's next awakening. Then we don't fail, Marcus replied simply. The transformation that had begun with the Void Wraith encounter was complete now. Marcus Chen, the 17-year-old student, existed only as a core personality within something far greater. His consciousness had become the nexus point for a collective intelligence that spanned species and dimensions, a fusion of human innovation and draconic wisdom that was rewriting the fundamental laws of reality through pure will. When Emperor Valix's image appeared on all communication channels demanding surrender, Marcus chose to meet him face to face. The Eternal Throne's throne room was a monument to imperial arrogance, a vast chamber filled with the accumulated treasures of 100 conquered civilizations. Valix himself sat at its center, a being so old that his body had been replaced piece by piece with mechanical components until only his consciousness remained recognizably organic. Marcus materialized before the throne without using any conventional form of transportation. He simply decided to be there, and reality complied. The Emperor's guards raised weapons that could atomize entire city blocks, but their shots passed harmlessly through Marcus's form. He existed in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously now, present and absent according to his own will. You came, Valix said, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. I thought you might. The young always believe they can solve everything through direct confrontation. You're afraid, Marcus observed, studying the Emperor with eyes that could perceive quantum structures. I can see it in your bioelectric patterns. This isn't about protecting galactic stability or preventing chaos. You're terrified of becoming obsolete. Valix's ancient features shifted into something approaching a smile. Of course I'm afraid. Do you know what the universe was like before the Dragon Lords were eliminated? Constant war, reality storms that could tear apart star systems, entire regions of space where the laws of physics changed hourly because some adolescent with godlike powers was having an emotional crisis. And yet somehow civilization survived, Marcus countered. Somehow life found a way to flourish. Maybe the chaos you describe wasn't destruction, maybe it was growth. Growth? Valix laughed bitterly. You call the death of trillions growth? You call the collapse of interstellar civilization progress? Marcus accessed genetic memories that stretched back to the height of the Dragon Lord era, seeing through the eyes of his predecessors. The Emperor wasn't entirely wrong. There had been chaos, destruction on an unimaginable scale. But there had also been wonders beyond description, realities where sentient beings could reshape existence itself to suit their needs. The old Dragon Lords made mistakes, Marcus admitted. They let power corrupt them, let their individual desires override their responsibilities. But that doesn't mean the power itself was wrong. It means they needed better guidance. And you think you can provide that guidance? You, a child who has known these abilities for less than a day? Not me alone, Marcus replied, but us. Humanity doesn't create individual gods. We create collective consciousness. Every human who awakens to these abilities becomes part of a greater whole, guided by shared wisdom rather than personal ambition. To demonstrate his point, Marcus opened a communication channel that connected directly to every human mind in the galaxy. Instantly, the throne room filled with ghostly figures, men, women, and children from 17 different worlds, all linked by the quantum network that Marcus had created. "Tell him," Marcus said to the assembled consciousness. "Tell him what we've become." The response came not as words, but as pure meaning, transmitted directly into Valix's ancient mind. He experienced for just a moment what it felt like to be part of something greater than individual existence. The loneliness that had plagued him for millennia was washed away by the warmth of genuine connection, the weight of impossible decisions lifted by the knowledge that others shared the burden. For the first time in 20,000 years, Emperor Valix wept. "I remember," he whispered. "Before the Empire, before the conquest, we were like you once, connected, united. But power corrupted us, turned us against each other. I became Emperor not to rule, but to prevent another civil war that would have destroyed everything. And you succeeded," Marcus acknowledged. "You created stability, order, peace. But you also created stagnation. The galaxy stopped growing, stopped evolving, because you were too afraid to let consciousness reach its full potential." Marcus extended his hand toward the Emperor, an offer of connection rather than conquest. "It doesn't have to be this way. Your people could join the network, add their wisdom to ours. Imagine what we could accomplish together, not as conquerors and conquered, but as partners in something greater." Valix stared at the offered hand for a long moment, then slowly reached out to accept it. The moment their consciousness touched, the change began. Through the quantum network, Zephyrian wisdom flowed to human minds while human adaptability reached ancient alien souls. The rigid hierarchy of the Empire began to dissolve, replaced by something more organic, more alive. Soldiers who had fought for duty alone suddenly remembered what it felt like to fight for love. Administrators who had processed requisitions for centuries began to see the lives behind the numbers. Emperor Valix's final act was to order the dissolution of his own empire, transforming it into something unprecedented, a galactic confederation based on willing cooperation rather than enforced submission. But even as victory seemed complete, Marcus felt new threats stirring in the depths of space. The Void Wraiths had reported to their superiors, and those superiors were not pleased with recent developments. Ancient powers that predated civilization itself were beginning to take notice of the quantum anomaly that was humanity's awakening. The war was over, but the real challenges were just beginning. Marcus had become something beyond human, beyond Dragon Lord, beyond any category that previous civilizations had imagined. But he was still at his core the boy who had dreamed of protecting others, and there were still others who needed protecting. The legend was about to begin. The ceremony took place on Terra Nova, where it had all begun. Representatives from every world in the former Zephyrian Empire had gathered to witness something that had never occurred in recorded history: the voluntary submission of the dragons of old to a master they had chosen rather than one imposed upon them. Marcus stood in the center of the Academy courtyard, which had been transformed into an amphitheater capable of holding millions of beings. But the true audience was far larger. Every consciousness in the galactic network was present, sharing the moment through quantum links that transcended physical space. 12,000 dragons filled the sky above Terra Nova, their forms creating a living constellation that could be seen from the far side of the galaxy. Each one was a being of immense power and ancient wisdom, creatures that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations beyond counting. And each one was here by choice, drawn by loyalty to the young human who had awakened something they had thought lost forever. Valdris descended first, his massive form settling onto the platform with surprising grace. The ancient dragon, who had served as weapon and prisoner for 5 millennia, now moved with the dignity of one who had remembered his true purpose. Marcus Chen of Terra Nova. Valdris spoke, his mental voice carrying across every link in the network. In the ancient tongue of our people, you are known as Draconis Rex, the Dragon King. But titles given by others hold little meaning. Today we offer something far more significant. The dragon lowered his massive head until it touched the ground before Marcus, a gesture of respect that sent shockwaves through the assembled multitudes. One by one, every other dragon in the sky followed suit. 12,000 beings of unimaginable power kneeling before a human who had shown them that servitude and partnership were not the same thing. We offer our service freely given, Valdris continued. Not as weapons to be wielded, but as guardians to stand beside you. Not as slaves to be commanded, but as allies who choose to follow where you lead. Accept our bond, young lord, and let the galaxy see what true partnership can accomplish. Marcus felt the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about dragons or humans or even the former Zephyrian Empire. This was about establishing a new paradigm for consciousness itself, proving that power could be shared rather than hoarded, that evolution could proceed through cooperation rather than conquest. I accept, Marcus said simply, his words carrying across the quantum network to reach every corner of the galaxy, but not as a master accepting servants, as a partner accepting allies, as a friend welcoming friends. The moment their bond was formally acknowledged, reality itself seemed to exhale in relief. The quantum storms that had threatened space-time stability during the awakening process suddenly calmed, settling into new patterns that actually strengthened the cosmic structure rather than threatening it. From Earth's moon, newly awakened human children watched their skies fill with dragons and felt no fear, only wonder. On Proxima Station, Zephyrian engineers worked alongside human scientists to design technologies that neither species could have imagined alone. Throughout the galaxy, former enemies were becoming collaborators in the greatest experiment ever attempted, the conscious evolution of an entire civilization. But Marcus knew that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The Void Wraiths had withdrawn, but they would return with reinforcements from dimensions where the laws of physics were fundamentally different. Ancient powers that had slept since the universe was young were beginning to stir, awakened by the quantum resonance of humanity's transformation. You sense them too, Valdris observed, his ancient consciousness touching the edges of threats that existed beyond normal space-time. The architects, the beings who set the fundamental constants that govern reality itself. They will not tolerate unlimited consciousness expansion indefinitely. Then we'll have to prove to them that consciousness and cosmic stability aren't mutually exclusive, Marcus replied. We'll show them that evolution and order can coexist. He turned to address the assembled representatives, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had already accomplished the impossible. Today marks the beginning of a new age. Not an age of human dominance or dragon supremacy, but an age of conscious cooperation. We will face challenges that dwarf anything our species have encountered before. Threats that come from the very foundations of reality itself. Marcus gestured toward the star-filled sky, where distant galaxies sparkled with the promise of infinite possibility. But we will face them together, human and dragon, Zephyrian and the countless other species who choose to join our alliance. We will prove that consciousness is not chaos, that awareness is not entropy, that the universe is better when its children are awake rather than asleep. The ceremony concluded with a demonstration that would become legend throughout the galaxy. Marcus and the Dragon Collective reached out with their combined will and began to heal the scars left by millennia of warfare. Dead worlds bloomed with new life. Shattered star systems reformed into stable configurations. The quantum fractures left by ancient battles were mended through pure conscious intent. It was a message sent to every corner of existence. The age of destruction was ending, and the age of creation had begun. Years later, when historians tried to capture the moment that Marcus Chen became a legend, they would struggle to find adequate words. How do you describe a 17-year-old boy who convinced the universe's most powerful beings to kneel not in submission, but in partnership? How do you explain the day when humanity stopped being just another species and became something unprecedented in cosmic history? Perhaps the answer lay not in the grand gestures or the display of impossible powers, but in something simpler. In the moment when Marcus had looked at Director Harrison and his fellow students and promised that everyone would be saved, in his refusal to accept that any price was too high for protecting the innocent, in his unwavering belief that consciousness was not a mistake to be corrected, but a gift to be celebrated, the dragons of old had found their new master, but more importantly, they had found their new purpose. Together with humanity and all who chose to join them, they would guard the flame of awareness against whatever ancient darkness might try to extinguish it. The boy had become legend. The legend had become hope, and hope, as the universe was about to discover, was the most powerful force of all.